Welcome to the Alyosha Society, where we are pursuing truth, beauty, and goodness through great literature. Hello, everyone. My name is Bruce Etter, and I'm the founder of the Alyosha Society. In this video, I want to address an issue that has caused a tremendous amount of division, tension, controversy in our culture today. And the issue is critical theory. Critical theory. You've probably heard terms like CRT, critical race theory, or feminist theory. What exactly is it? What is it not? And is it good? Is it bad? What are we as Christians to think about it? In this video, I want to carefully define it, walk through it, and then give an assessment of it. Now, I'm doing this video primarily for my middle school and high school students. So I want to break things down and make them hopefully easy to digest. But I'm also going to put this on my website for anybody to check out. So let's get right to it. Got some slides I want to share with you. Kind of help us walk through some definitions and examples, things like that. So let's get started. So the issue with critical theory primarily has to do with interpretation. How do you interpret the world? How do you interpret a book? How do you interpret a piece of literature? How do you interpret a movie? How do you interpret just about anything? Now, we're going to be focusing here primarily on literature, because that's primarily where you would discuss different areas of critical theory, but it honestly could be applied to just about anything. So when you're reading a work of literature, how do you know what it means? How do you just make up your own meaning? Do you just sort of turn a story into having any kind of message or moral that you want it to have? Well, that's the question. That is the question that's caused a lot of hubbub in our culture. So first of all, let's define some terms that you'll hear kind of thrown around here and there, and it'll hopefully make this easier to understand. First of all, you may have heard the expression death of an author. Yeah, we're not talking about the literal physical death of somebody who wrote a book. No, death of an author is the idea that the author's intent doesn't matter. Now, we call this authorial intent. So those who believe in the idea of death of the author would say, you can read a book, and you can read any story, and it does not matter at all what the author intended. You can make up your own meaning for the story. That's what death of the author is referring to. I already kind of gave this one away. Authorial intent is what did the author actually intend? Now, again, if you embrace the idea of death of the author, then you don't care. I'm going to say that we should care. I'm going to say that we should care about authorial intent. More on that to come. Next definition, critical theory, or as it's sometimes called, literary theory. And I'm going to go into way more detail on this one because that's really the point of this video. But critical theory is the worldview lens through which you view literature. Now, I'm not going to elaborate right now because I'm spending the whole video on that. What I'm doing now is separating out these definitions because they get muddled up and kind of all blended together sometime. The next one, literary criticism. Literary criticism. Now, literary criticism is when you give a critical review of a work of literature and you're making a value judgment about it. You're analyzing it and you're concluding questions like good or bad. You're making a judgment call on that piece of literature. Did it accomplish what it was supposed to accomplish? Is it a good piece of writing or does it just stink? Okay, that's literary criticism. Literary analysis. So now we've got three separate terms: critical theory, literary criticism, and literary analysis. Oh, this is a different term. Literary analysis doesn't have anything to do with judging whether or not this is a good book or a bad book. It's simply diving into the book and understanding the literary techniques that the author is using in order to get a deeper understanding of the book. So, for example, how does the author use similes or metaphors? How does the author use colors to present moods or worldviews or expectations or foreshadowings? It's sort of the literary toolbox that the author has. You're looking into the work and you're saying, oh, I think this or that. When he uses the color red, it seems to indicate something about anger or sin or something like that. When he uses the color green, it seems, I do this when I teach through Crime and Punishment with my students. Dostoevsky is one of my favorite authors, and the way he uses the colors, green and yellow and red in Crime and Punishment is really extraordinary. The way he uses bridges in that novel. He's communicating deeper things. That's literary analysis. So if you need to pause the video, but I want you to make sure you understand the difference in these three terms. Critical theory, worldview lens. Literary criticism, analyzing a work but making a judgment about it. Literary analysis, just trying to figure out what tools the author used so you can better understand the story. So let's dive into different areas of critical theory. Now remember, critical theory is the point of this video. That's the worldview lens. It'll all make sense soon enough. But there are different areas of critical theory. You know, in our culture today, you hear primarily the expression CRT, critical race theory. But race theory is just one of many areas of critical theory. So critical theory is like this big pie, okay? And critical race theory is just one little slice of it, you might say. Well, what are some of the other slices of that pie? Well, I'm not going to give you all of them. There may be an infinite number of them, but I'm going to give you some of the main ones that literary scholars talk about. First of all, there's psychoanalytic criticism. And I'm actually going to walk through these. So I'm not going to define them right now. There's psychoanalytic criticism, Marxist criticism, feminist criticism, reader response, structuralist criticism, deconstructive. I got to figure out how to get my webcam out of the way. New historicism, lesbian, gay, or queer criticism, African-American criticism, which would really fall under the definition there. That's CRT, critical race theory, same thing. And then new criticism. So I'm going to be looking at 10 pieces of this pie, the whole pie being critical theory. And these are just different aspects of it. So let's take a look at better understanding what critical theory is. I said earlier that it's the worldview lens through which you view fill in the blank, a book, a movie, just about anything really. So, but here again, we're talking about the text, we're talking about literature. So let's get my webcam out of the way. So over here on the right-hand side, we have the reader. Now, when I pick up a book as a reader, and you're the same, you are going to decide what glasses you're going to use when reading the text. And I'm not talking about these. I'm talking about a worldview lens. Nobody looks at a text through no worldview lens. You see, that doesn't exist. Everybody is looking at a text and their past experiences, their feelings, their faith, their lack of faith, whatever it is, those are the glasses through which you are understanding and interpreting and reading a text. Okay, we all have to acknowledge that, first of all. If you don't acknowledge that, then it's hard to have a conversation. Everybody has a pair of those, no matter what. And that really is your area of critical theory. The glasses equal your critical theory, your area of critical theory. So let's see how this pans out. Bunch of arrows. So another way of saying it might be the way you view the text. The way you view the text. If I were to take these glasses off and shade them with some sort of a red shading or blue shading or a yellow shading, then everything I look at on the page would be seen through that lens. Everything would look red or blue or yellow. That's critical theory, the way that you view the text. Okay, and there's the text. So I want you to kind of get this image in your mind. The reader is looking at a story. The reader has a pair of glasses on, metaphorically speaking. The glasses are areas of critical theory. All right, everybody got that? All right, let's take a look at different areas of critical theory. So here's our text. Or again, remember, this could be a movie. This could be any kind of media. And something is moving in on it. There's a worldview through which you're viewing it. Is it feminism? Is it reader response? Now, again, these are just all the different pieces of the critical theory pie. Psychoanalytic theory, African-American theory, New Historicism. These are the same ones that I gave you earlier. Queer theory, Marxist theory. So there they are. There they are. I hope this is kind of starting to make a little sense. But I am going to go through and define each one of them and then give an assessment at the end. So let's begin with psychoanalytic criticism. Our good old friend, Dr. Sigmund Freud here. So if I am reading a text through the lens of psychoanalytic critical theory, then what am I doing? Okay, I'm reading the book, and here are the questions I'm asking. Are there incidents of denial or displacement? So what I'm doing is I'm taking the worldview of, say, Carl Jung or Sigmund Freud or some form of psychoanalysis. And I'm saying, well, I believe that everything, that the motivating force in life is this thing, whatever Jung or Freud or another psychiatrist said about it. So therefore, every story must have these elements in it. Does that make sense? So how are you living in denial? How are you not facing this or that? Are certain characters repressing painful events, maybe from their childhood? You see how the Freudian thought kind of comes in there. How about sibling rivalries? You know, we are defined by these, they define us, so therefore they must be in every story. Oedipal dynamics. You know, the Oedipus complex. Remember Oedipus, the story from ancient literature? The guy who was destined to kill his own father and marry his mother. So some of those in the psychiatric field would say that is this sort of primal desire of every man, that he wants to kill his dad. He wants to conquer the patriarch and marry his mother. It physically, literally, symbolically, whatever the case may be. So when you're reading a story, where do you see that? It must be in there, because these are the things that are the driving forces of what motivates us to do what we do. Are there any other Freudian or Jungian insights? So that's psychoanalytic criticism. If you're looking at a work based on psychoanalytic criticism, you're going to be looking for characters who exhibit characteristics of what psychoanalytic criticism would say are the three parts of our psyche: the id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is that, you know, it's sort of like, you know, the good angel and the not so good angel, you know, on each shoulder. The id is sort of like the bad angel who's telling you to do bad things. You know, the superego is the good angel telling you to do good things. And you've always got this battle going on. The ego is kind of what manages the two, sort of tries to bring some sort of middle ground between them. So when I'm reading a story, do I see id and ego and superego? Id, ego, and superego. Do I see those in the story? Do I see instincts, reality, and morality? So let me see if I can give you an example here. Well, the id, I want that thing right now. I don't want to wait for it. The superego. Good people don't think about those things. The ego, can we all just get along? Can't we all just get along? That's the ego. Okay. So here you go. There's all these different artistic renderings of id, ego, and superego. But this is one of my favorites. This is one of my favorites. The idea that the Lord of the Rings story was actually intended to be a picture of psychoanalytic realities with, you know, Frodo balancing the goodness on one end of Samwise Gamgee and the id, that very evil voice Gollum, on the other. All right, that's psychoanalytic theory. All right, let's move on. Marxist criticism. Now, what if my worldview is Marxism? That means that I believe that all of reality is defined by economic forces. So when I read a book, I have been heavily influenced by Marx. So I'm going to be asking questions like, where do I see the evils of capitalism in this story? Where do I see imperialism, or where do I see, you know, capitalist failings? Oh, maybe they're known or unknown. What does the literary work have to say about class struggles? The very beginning of the Communist Manifesto says that all of history is the history of class struggle. So that's Marxism in a nutshell. Does in some way critique organized religion. You know, religion's the opium of the people. So if I'm reading something through the lens of Marxist critical theory, then I see Marxism under every rock, whether it's there or not. Whether it's there or not. Okay? Feminist criticism. I'm going to walk through the rest of these a little bit more quickly because I think you're getting the point. One of my favorite authors here, Virginia Woolf. But if I am looking at a work through the lens of critical theory, where do you see the patriarchy? Negative aspects of it. What does this work say about gender? Now, it doesn't matter if the work was written 200 or 300 years ago and people in that culture weren't even really talking about the same gender issues we're talking about. That doesn't matter. It's still there. It's just kind of buried, and you have to kind of dig it out. How are women maybe oppressed in this work? What is the role of women? How are men oppressing women? Are there any other feminist insights that I can read? Once again, same book. Okay, I'm just holding up a copy of Gulliver's Travels here. I happen to have a copy of it on my desk. But maybe I read Gulliver's Travels and I see Marxist ideas. Someone else might read it and see feminist ideas. Other people may read it and see id, ego, and superego. It's critical theory. All right, there's a few others here that I want you to know. Reader response says, okay, what is really important is how I interact with the work. So it's what's important is actually not exactly what this says, and definitely not what the author intended. That doesn't matter. Okay, the text is kind of this living thing that is always speaking something new to the next reader. Whatever is going on in the reader's imagination, that is what's valid. How does a reader create my own meaning as I read this work? So I make out of it whatever I want to make out of it. And that's what we're actually talking about, not authorial intent, not any historical context or anything like that at all. What is the connection between this meaning and the actual text? So here's how you find the meaning to what you're reading. I'm the reader. Then I look at my situation and my response to what I'm reading as I read this, and all that together in the blender, that gives me my final meaning, interpretation, and understanding of the text. Okay, so I found this little visual here that may be helpful. The writer, so Jonathan Swift writes this, and he says, all right, that's it, I'm done. But the text says, hey, wait a second, I'm not done yet. All right, I'm here to finish the job. And then the reader creates meaning from this living text, which is still active. Okay, New Historicism. New Historicism looks at a text and says, how does this show me different ways that people interpret history? So the way people interpret history defines our understanding of a text way more. What does the literary work tell us about political and ideological agendas? So, but here's what's important about New Historicism. There's no true understanding of history. There are various interpretations, and they're all valid. Lesbian, gay, or queer theory. More often I hear the term queer theory. I'm just letting you know that. I think the terms do change as time goes by, but I'm going to call this lesbian, gay, and or queer criticism. What are the glasses here? Well, I think you can figure it out. How is it shaped by its understanding of homosexuality? So there are individuals who maybe have repressed desires or feelings that are homosexual, and if you need to look for that. You need to find them. They're in there. How does it illustrate the inadequacy of these old, outdated views of sexuality? You know, one man, one woman for life. Oh boy, I'm going to find ways that this story is showing me that that's inadequate. Does it reveal, and I'll say this for the record, I'm not crazy about the word homophobic, but it's a word that's used in our culture, and that's why I put it in quotation marks. Does this work reveal, maybe secretly, maybe it's kind of in coded language, some sort of biases against same-sex relationships? And again, is there a gay presence in there that maybe is hidden? But when I look at this work through the lens of queer theory, I'm going to find them. I'm going to find them. Okay? Okay, African American criticism, also known as race criticism or critical race theory. Once again, the glasses are still on. It's just that now I'm viewing everything through the lens of race. Where do I see racism? Maybe tensions between individuals in here. Maybe the Lilliputians, you know, in the early chapters where we're talking about the Tramexans and the Slamexans and all the tensions they have. Maybe those tensions point more to race tensions than class tensions. See, a Marxist sees class struggle. Someone who's looking at it through the lens of CRT sees race struggle. Okay, just a couple more of these. New criticism, again, for the sake of time, I don't necessarily want to dwell on all of these, but this was popular in the middle of the 20th century. So how can I look at a work and see that the meaning of it transcends time? Now, you can't know anything about an author's true intent. You can't. That's just a guessing game. So there's no need to go into all of that. Just forget that. Just pick up the book and start reading it. And what universal meaning does it have? My personal response, see, that's reader response theory is different. That's unreliable. how does it have its own sort of objective universal meaning? You see that? How is it a great work of literature in and of itself, independent of anything else? Author, intent, biography, the text in itself, or the text itself, all right? So those are the areas of critical theory. I hope that this makes a little more sense now. Once again, I go back to our visual here. Reader, glasses, text, critical theory. And we've examined all these different areas. And you can go into way more detail, friends, way more detail. I am barely, embarrassingly skimming the surface here of these different areas of critical theory. What I want to do now is let's assess it. And look, I want to be fair. I want to try to be fair. I want to try to look at critical theory and say, where might it be good and helpful, and where might it not? So first of all, let me go over the not. So what are some problems with critical theory from a Christian perspective? Remember, everybody has on the glasses. It's not a matter, I mean, I have on literal and figurative glasses. My worldview is a Judeo-Christian worldview. I have to at least admit that when I approach life, movies, books, its relationships, etc., that I'm coming at it from that perspective. It's the person who says they don't have any glasses on that you can't hardly even have a conversation with, because they don't even recognize that reality. So let's look at problem number one. Now that you're experts, let's examine this. First of all, what is the underlying assumption of critical theory? What would have to be true for critical theory to be valid? Well, that those worldviews all around that circle I showed you, those 10 areas, that those are all valid worldviews. So they would assume the validity of Marxism, of feminism. So they would assume the underlying assumptions, that those underlying assumptions, those worldviews are true. And that would be problematic. You see, I don't agree with Marx when he says that all of history is the history of class struggles and that that's all that really motivates. I don't agree with Freud when he says, when he talks about sex and sexuality being this overall driving force. So I look at Scripture, and I see in Scripture what it is that makes man what he is, made in the image of God, but sinful and the heart's desperately wicked, and so forth. So I build my glasses are coming from that truth, and critical theory would assume the validity of these other worldviews. So that's a problem. Secondly, if you noticed, those worldviews are areas and issues that are popular now. Guess what? They won't necessarily be popular 20 years from now, or 40 years from now, or 100 years from now. We might be looking back, in fact, I am certain we will 100 years from now, and looking back at these areas of critical theory and thinking, those are not the most important issues in our culture. So we're taking the worldviews that happen to be popular now to interpret 3,000 years worth of literature. I'm reading Homer, I'm reading Virgil, I'm reading Aeschylus or Sophocles. So I'm reading all of these thousands of years of literature and history and interpret them through the lens of a worldview that just happens to be hip and cool right now. That doesn't seem to be very wise. That seems to me to be an arrogant thing. It's almost as if to say, well, we finally figured it all out now. Now we have the proper lens through which to view all of these works of literature, whatever the case may be. I'm not comfortable with that. So should we always just interpret literature in light of the whatever religions or worldviews are in vogue at that time? Well, now some people would say yes. Some people would say, Bruce, 100 years from now, we should have a different, the pie should look different. Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think that's just kind of blowing back and forth with the winds of cultural change, the flimsy, unreliable whims of culture. And I'm not comfortable with that. Yeah, we really have figured it all out, like never before, right now. So that's problem number 2. Problem number 3, critical theory, the famous Jung-Freud tension over there. There's a problem with consistency. What do I mean by that? Well, when you look at even 2 individuals who might provide you with a framework, let's say, of psychoanalytic theory, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, they don't even agree. They don't even agree on what the question should be for psychoanalytic theory. So which one should I follow? I know some of you probably have strong opinions about that, but the problem is obvious. There's a problem consistently. Everyone would not agree as to what should be the issues with feminist theory or Marxist theory or queer theory or CRT. There's inconsistency even within that particular area of critical theory. So we're just kind of constantly shifting, bouncing around with no stability. Because I mean, I look at this last issue here. Even certain words, certain terms that are considered racist now might not have been considered racist 50 years ago. And that's going to change 50 years from now. So how do I come up with some sort of reliable standard? Now, critical theory doesn't give me that. All right, number 4. Poor lady doesn't know which pair of glasses she's supposed to wear. If it's acceptable to interpret something through a Marxist or feminist lens, then why not a Christian lens? Why is a Judeo-Christian theory not a thing? Or what about Buddhist theory or Hindu theory? How about polygamist theory? How about polyandrist? See, these are, married groups, like 2 guys are married to 3 girls, or a guy is married to a tree. I mean, trust me, there are crazy things like that going on in that world out there. So what about capitalist theory? How come those wouldn't be valid as well? You see how these questions kind of get muddled up. Who decides which ones are valid? Yeah, it's sort of like the cultural mob gets to decide what's hip and cool and woke at any particular time in history. And if you're not on that train, then you just don't have any validity to your perspective. Contemporary teachers of literature at colleges and universities and graduate level, they wouldn't view the Judeo-Christian worldview as a valid perspective. But why not? Why not? See, there's an inconsistency there. Okay, so analyzing critical theory, let's just take a really quick look, summarizing our conclusions. Problem number 1, critical theory assumes the validity of those worldviews. And as Christians, we're not willing to do that. Critical theory also assumes that the ones that are popular now are kind of sort of the ones we should just go with. Critical theory is built upon worldviews that are themselves inconsistent and in flux. Even within the piece of pie, there isn't consistency and agreement. And then critical theory doesn't even allow for every area and every worldview. They would say that some are sort of inherently invalid. That's just a nice euphemistic way of saying the Christian worldview. Critical theory and the Parthenon of modern culture. Why is all of this true? I thought very deeply about this one. And these areas of critical theory, the way I view them, they're sort of like, if you think of modern culture as a polytheistic world. I know you're thinking, Bruce, polytheism existed in the ancient world. It doesn't exist today. No, that's not true. We have many gods in our culture today. And these areas of critical theory are basically our deities. These interpretive grids, because we have kind of put them up on this pedestal. We've elevated them to the status of being the lens through which we view reality. And that's obviously a picture of the Parthenon there, a temple that was built in the 5th century BC, dedicated to Athena. She supposedly helped the Greeks defeat the Persians in the Greek and Persian wars. What is our Athena today? Ultimately, everything and everybody bows down to pluralism. Pluralism, multiculturalism. Everybody's right. Everything is valid. Everything goes, except a worldview that says that's not true. Yeah, you see the problems inherent and where these are some of the foundational ideas of critical theory. Now, critical theory, final word. I said earlier, I want to be fair, and I want to offer a word of whatever you want to call it, praise maybe for critical theory. What can be beneficial about critical theory? Because I think it can. I believe that as believers, we should be experts in all of these areas of critical theory, because these are the deities of our culture. And we're trying to communicate the gospel to that culture. We should know what their deities are. We should know what these various lenses are, because knowing them can open up our own minds even to, we want to be able to see the world as our neighbor sees the world, because we want to be able to help them see the world through the lens of the gospel. I think that would be important. I think that would be very helpful. Knowing these various lenses can also help us have meaningful dialogue with those outside the Christian faith. Look, understanding critical race theory can give me a deeper sensitivity to the real issues of racism in our country. Understanding the questions and issues of Marxism can help me better understand the valid aspects of class struggles and where capitalism, dare I say it, where capitalism does fall short. Capitalism is not the gospel. You see what I'm saying? So knowing these different areas of critical theory can help me understand my friends who are not believers, can help me have a deeper sensitivity to areas where different individuals have been oppressed, which are valid. Friends, the Bible is full, replete with instances and condemnation of individuals and institutions that oppress the poor and oppress the weak. And we're supposed to be loving and sympathetic to the underdog. So knowing some of these areas can be helpful there. But again, there are pitfalls. The 4 problems that I just went over. Be careful that you don't elevate the lens, that lens of critical theory, to the status of infallibility. That would be a problem. I believe that the only infallible perspective is the biblical one, because I believe the Bible is God's word. It's God's revelation to us, and that it's the only inerrant and infallible perspective. So when I'm teaching literature, I said there is a lens. Yeah, there is a lens. So the method that I believe we should use is called the biographical historical approach. So in other words, authorial intent does matter. Can I understand every aspect of an author's intent when I read a book? No, but that doesn't mean we just go with death of the author and throw it all out the window. Not at all. So I start asking questions like this. What's the genre of this book? History, satire, mystery? What the genre is going to give me the tools and the rules that I should use to interpret it and understand it. I'm not going to interpret a satire in the same way that I might interpret a murder mystery. They're just not the same. Or a poem, or a historical narrative. I want to learn everything I can about who wrote it. I love reading biographies. And I have read biographies of my favorite authors, multiple biographies: Flannery O'Connor, Jane Austen, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Charles Dickens. These are some of my favorite authors. And their works make much more sense to me the more I know about their lives. It's very important. What do we know about his or her life that might help us understand it better? And I also like to find out who were the authors that influenced this author. Who did Jane Austen like to read? Who did Dostoevsky like to read? That's going to help you understand what they're saying, because that's what shaped them. What do I know about the philosophical, political, cultural, historical context in which it was written? Because every author is swimming around in a culture that is shaping the way they understand everything. And who was the audience? The audience is very important. Understanding the audience is going to help me understand the work a lot more. So I have hopefully given you some definitions that are helpful, an assessment and some examples of critical theory. Hopefully I've given you an analysis of it and a critique of it that is helpful for you. Even, don't forget this, even some areas where critical theory can be beneficial to us. And then how I believe we should approach a work of literature. Well, friends, once again, my name is Bruce Etter, and I'm the founder of the Alyosha Society. Check out the website. We have a book club and some courses that I'm offering there. I hope this video has been helpful